Good morning. It's finally Friday. It's July 29th, 2022. We're going into the August long weekend, as Ian Spencer has pointed out, or it's Heritage Day or whatever way it goes. It's one of those non-stat ones, but a lot of people take it. And it looks like, at least out here in Alberta, it's going to be some great weather for it. So I'm sure everybody's got one foot out the door at work right now. Looking forward to taking advantage of it. I'll be doing lots of stuff around the house and helping Jane at the Millerville market down there south of town at her setup and things. I'm looking forward to the weekend, though. It's been a long one. I mean, it's wearing having to report on all the idiocy in this country. It gives me lots of things to rant about and lots of material. But man, they tire me out sometimes. It's just an abundance of foolishness to keep me going. I mean, that's the basis of my show. I trade in anger, but I like to hope that it leads to good solutions to policy issues later on as well. That's why I get guests to break it up, so I'm not ranting for a solid hour and a half. Either way, I've got a good show lined up for today, of course, and a couple of good guests as always. So let's talk about the observations, those things that are important as we're getting ready for the weekend here. It is International Chicken Wing Day. Yeah, this is the day you celebrate those chicken wings, that traditional bar food. It was a football food. This was if you look at the history of it, it's pretty interesting. I owned a bar, and oh my God, it took me a couple of years. I'm just starting now to be able to enjoy chicken wings again because I made and sold so many orders of it. But I mean, in Buffalo, that's where it did all start with the Buffalo hot sauce. Was one little bar and a woman who thought, what are we going to do with these leftover old wings? Because we're cutting them off the birds, and they were a waste product. And now, man, they're expensive either way. And they also now rank a whole day to be observed and enjoyed and appreciated. So, hey, before you get ready for the weekend, have some chicken wings. It's also National Talk in an Elevator Day. So if you're like us, we're downtown in an office tower. I've got to ride an elevator. I got to spend time in close proximity with people. This is the time you're supposed to look over at that person you see at the same time, the same day, every day at the start and at lunchtime and going down the elevator. You look over and start talking to them. You reach over to them, you might get in a lot of trouble. And this is not to be mistaken for fart in an elevator day, which actually that one can be observed anytime you like, but it may not make you popular with others. It is a good way to get an elevator to yourself, though. You build a reputation, you get down to that bottom floor and you're waiting for elevators, and suddenly people have other things to do before they get in. All right, I'm going to have first guest a little later, retired Justice Brian Giesbrecht on. He's been on before. And I'm just staying on that issue. I mean, we've had the Pope touring and apologizing and, everything going on. Of course, it's never enough, but all over the residential school issue. And former Justice Giesbrecht has been very, of course, involved in this issue and involved in the law. And we're going to be talking about, when are we going to get an RCMP investigation into these apparent buried bodies all over in these schools? When's it going to happen? Why haven't they? I mean, we've had a crime apparently, but there's no investigation. So we'll chat about that. And then I'm going to speak to Barry Moore, and he started an app called Flashcard Democracy. He's trying to build a new way of polling, basically, whether it's issue polling, political polling, things like that. He's trying sort of an innovation. He's concerned that people are not necessarily informed if they respond to polls. So this is a way to kind of make sure a person realizes what they're answering to. So we'll have a conversation with Sam and see what that's about, because polls are big and they do influence us, whether we like it or not. And, the more accurate they are, the better it is for all of us. All right, let's see what's got me going. Today it's environmentalists. I mean, modern environmentalists have become a cult of Luddites, opposed to every development made to make life more comfortable for human beings. And they can't be reasoned with. They're blinded by ideology and an anti-human outlook. They can't be dismissed either, as they're occupying the halls of power in both the government and the corporate world. They're imposing their crazed policies, and they are crazy, and citizens are suffering because of it. Their sights are most commonly set on climate change, and it's a convenient boogeyman for their cause. They can and do blame everything on climate change. I mean, from racism to obesity to weather events. I know that sounds exaggerated, but I invite you to look it up. They blame everything on it. Climate change is a catch-all term, and when coupled with the word emergency, of course, policymakers then feel justified in pushing the most extreme and harmful of policies. One of Trudeau's top men is Stephen Guilbeault. Guilbeault is an extremist, well-known for being led away in handcuffs in his orange prison jumpsuit, as you can see in that picture there, while he manically grins after he's performed yet another extreme and criminal action, ostensibly in the fight against climate change. Normally, such a record would halt a developing political career. In Canada, it got him a senior cabinet position in the government. Guilbault doesn't feel a ban on plastic cutlery goes far enough. He wants all disposable cutlery to be gone, whether compostable or not. Have no fear, though, he has a solution. He says we should eat with our hands. You can't make this sort of thing up. The climate change cult completely ignores the benefits of modern energy sources. Reliable, affordable energy is essential for the survival of the developed world. Eco-fanatics live in a crazed world of denial and hold this romanticized visions of a blissful past where humans lived in harmony with nature and had no impact upon it. They love to push visions of First Nations people living that way, for example. Now let's get back to reality. 300 years ago, the average lifespan for an Indigenous person in North America was under 30 years. They were typically nomadic foragers and hunters, and they were at the mercy of nature. Famines were common, as were deaths from exposure to extreme elements and territorial wars as starving tribes fought over limited resources. And I'm not faulting these people for the conditions they lived in. It was just part of every, human culture that came up. But I do want people to understand life before modern energy was no paradise for human beings at all. I don't expect we're going to be driven back to the Neolithic levels of human development, but we're having our advances reversed. An obsessive anti-oil and gas movement has been shutting down production of affordable energy throughout the developed world. Europe's in an energy crisis right now, and they're going to be suffering as winter is starting to loom. And this can't all be blamed on Russia. Europe was facing an energy crisis well before the first Russian soldier headed west into Ukraine. Germany was advising its citizens to learn how to cook over a candle in 2021 due to the energy shortage then. The reason Germany is in such dire straits is they brought in and bought into the environmental religion in full. They spent hundreds of billions on supposed sustainable energy sources such as wind and solar. They inexplicably shut down their nuclear generating capacity on the advice of eco-cultists, then discovered they were as dependent on fossil fuels as ever. And now we're totally beholden to Russia for their energy sources while they scramble to try and reopen coal plants. Germany was warned. The rest of Europe was warned. Your engineers and business people have tried to tell them there wasn't a viable replacement for conventional energy sources. It didn't matter. The climate cult ignored reason and went ahead with their self-destructive policies. Despite the stark failure of Europe's green energy efforts, Canada is insistent on following on the same path. I mean, while the world's begging for our oil and gas, we're shutting it in. While Dutch farmers revolt and Sri Lanka's government fell due to environmentally driven fertilizer bans, Trudeau wants to do the same thing here. Quislings in the corporate world are falling over themselves trying to appease the green cult, and it won't work. While auto manufacturers commit to ending production of gas-powered vehicles, electrical vehicles are nowhere close to becoming a viable alternative. While oil and gas companies impose ever harsher emission controls upon themselves, the climate cult still demands that they be shut down. They're not going to win, guys. Meanwhile, the cost of energy continues to climb and contribute to an increased cost of living for the entire world. The Luddites and the climate cult are winning. They're dragging human advancement backwards, and they don't care about the human cost. Now, while I don't expect we're going to end up back in medieval times, we're heading in that direction. The only question is how far we're going to let the climate cult and their cultists, it's time to start labeling them for what they are. And how far are we going to let them pull us back before we stand up for ourselves and say that's enough? We should learn from the Sri Lankan citizens. Unfortunately, people are going to have to get colder and hungrier before they realize what they really bought into with this green new world. Well, that's what's got me wound up today. All right, let's get into our newsroom and see what else is winding folks up, including me, I'm sure, with Dave Naylor, our news editor. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going well, Cory. You're winding people up. You've done it again, haven't you, with your social media account and the poor Pope?
Well, yes, I mean, I couldn't help it. I mean, it was a striking picture. The Pope was harvesting a holy booger from his beatific nostrils. And I thought this helps humanize this man. It brings him down to earth and make them realize that he's just like one of us, in there. And they got upset. They how dare you do this with this holy figure and expose him for what he is. And there's just no appreciation out there.
Well, I mean, I don't know what to say, Cory. I mean, we all pick our nose. Did he eat it?
I don't know. I just got the still, as we can see, yes, sir, just get a Kleenex there for a second, Dave. And
Sorry, that's why we was on the photo
around here. But yeah, it was just a funny picture. I mean, yeah, everybody. I mean, somebody like him, when you got 100 cameras on you 24/7. I mean, when you get that, wayward nose goblin, you got to deal with it. But I had some fun with it. But I'm afraid my Catholic followers got upset.
No sense of humor, Cory. No sense of humor. I hear Duke the Wonder Dog's having some guests this weekend.
Yeah. In our B&B, we've got there's the big dog show going on in Spruce Meadows this weekend. So I mean, that's Calgary's version of like that one out on New York every year or whatever. It's a big one, and we got a bunch of guests coming in and staying in the house and in our glamping facility out there in Pritis, and they bringing all their dogs for the dog show. So I'm really going to have to be careful with Duke not to have him go out there and consume these show dogs. I don't know if our insurance covers that.
That would be high comedy if it did, Cory. So hopefully around 7 o'clock tonight, you're going to be at your computer for the premiere of the Western Standard's first documentary. It's called Abandoned, but Not Forgotten not forgotten by Canadian generals. And it's the shameful tale, Cory, of what the Liberal government has done in abandoning thousands of Afghans who helped the Canadian military. And they've left them to the hands of the Taliban now, and we know what happens to people with the Taliban. And I've watched the video. It's done by our senior political correspondent Linda Slobody and put together magnificently by Nico. So yeah, that's going out at 7 o'clock tonight, and it is a must watch in my opinion. Lots of other good stuff on our website right now. Crazy Elizabeth May is apparently going to seek the leadership of the Green Party again. Sources are saying she's going about collecting signatures to be able to enter the race. And we all remember how much fun it was when she was the leader before. Vegas, if you know any friends in Vegas right now, they had a bad night, torrential flooding, shut down the entire strip, Cory, flash floodings, Caesar's Palace was flooded out, underground parking. Our Mike Thomas has got a good story on it up there now, and several videos where you can just see how badly Mother Nature treated Las Vegas. The German city of Hanover has banned hot water in municipal buildings and swimming pools and things like that. So no hot showers at work anymore. This is because of the Russians cutting off the gas supply over Germany's helping the Ukraine. So that's going to be fun and games for them. Our David Creighton has got a column, his latest column on the Trudeau follies, this time talking about your friends in the Green movement and how they are basically going to kill Canadian farming, and Trudeau has got to go. Spare me for a second. Lots of good stuff up there. We got a BC Mountie who was a dog handler, so he was able to take his police car home with him. Got absolutely hammered and drove drunk and passed out at a BC Burger King, where he was discovered. A poor Burger King employee couldn't wake him and called the authorities after about 20 minutes. So he's been able to keep his job. You remember the outroar earlier this week over the Canmore Deli. A former co-owner wrote a very homophobic letter to Pride people who were trying to ask him for some sponsorship or a gift for Canmore Pride Week. They've put out a new social media policy, hoping to get some customers back. And no surprise to me, Cory, but the cost of the Coastal GasLink pipeline up 70%, but they're still on time to finish it off. I think it's either by the end of 23 or 24. So may finally get a pipeline up and operating, but the cost is pretty significantly going up. So that's up there at the moment. Lots of good stuff this afternoon, and working to have a little cache of stories for the long weekend to keep people interested, Cory.
Yeah, just that reminder. I mean, we really actually scrabble quite a bit before long weekends because, we are still a small outlet. We got a lot of people out there, but that content on the weekend keeps coming out. Yeah, keep an eye on the site. As you said, too, with Linda's documentary, Linda Slobody, and that really is something to look forward to tonight.
It is. And we're working hard. You can see all the staff behind me. I think a lot of them have already started their their long weekend, including boss man Derek. So yeah, it's going to be good. Linda's piece is absolutely magnificent, and I really do encourage people to watch it. And if you don't feel a sense of shame as a Canadian afterwards, it's bad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, right on. Thank you for the updates, Dave, and I'll see you after the show.
And I enjoy the haircut, Cory, very much.
Oh, thanks. Yes, I'm good for another couple months now.
There you go. Thanks, Cory.
All right, Dave. Thanks. So yes, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor, always busy and hammering away in there, getting that content out. As you can see, so many stories, so much stuff going on. And again, yeah, that reminder of Linda Slobodian's Abandoned But Not Forgotten. Her and Nico have worked on that for a long time, and it's officially coming out tonight at 7 o'clock. It will be up on video. You know, I understand it might not be available right at 7. That's just when you can catch it fresh. But it, of course, is going to be up there to be viewed afterwards as well. You know, you got a weekend coming up. It's full of great information. Linda interviewed a number of retired Canadian generals and other individuals and covered the whole story on just that debacle and horrific, it was almost a year ago, abandonment, basically, of our allies in Afghanistan. It was terrible. But it's a dark subject, but it's a well-documented, well worth it to go into. And it's sort of a first for the Western Standard, doing that sort of documentary form of a production, and I really invite you guys to view it. I know Claudette Lease, commenter, saying, is it going to be a podcast as well? I'm not sure if we're going to put it out in just audio at some point or not, but for now it'll be the video, and it'll be on our regular channels on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, all the rest of them, even LinkedIn, I believe. And we might have an audio one come out a little later. That is a good question. I thank you for that. So, and this is where I like to remind everybody, the reason we're doing these documentaries, the reason we got this news copy, the reason it's all going on is because you guys have been subscribing. We are subscriber-based. And, can always have to express my appreciation to you guys who have ponied up. It's $10 a month, $99 for a year, and thousands of you have done so. So it's allowed us to build this studio, for us to have reporters across the country, to have Dave in the newsroom, trying to keep them all in line and keep that good news copy coming out. So if you've already subscribed, thank you very much, guys. And if you haven't yet, get on there, guys. It's not much, $99 a year. Let's use those lefty things when they're always talking about spending more money. Less than a cup of coffee a day, and you'll get full, unfettered access to all of our opinion content, our news stories, everything as they come out. So let's see what else we got going on. Some of the stuff that Dave mentioned. Yeah, it's funny, that dog show going on down in South Calgary. Somebody else, one of the commenters said, it was Westminster was the other one I couldn't think of before there. But if you haven't seen it, an older show, a mockumentary, Best in Show. It was Michael McKean and others in that. It's just hilarious. If you're looking for a weekend watch, not that I throw viewing advice out all that often, but it parodies that dog show culture and things like that. Eugene Levy. It was just an ensemble cast of comedians. It's fantastic. Give that a watch. Search it out on streaming or something. Best in Show. It's a hilarious watch if you're looking for something on the long weekend, maybe when you're hiding within your air-conditioned home from some of that heat, and see where it goes. That's a new one. Dave brought up on that with the Hanover, Germany banning hot water. Like when I was talking earlier, but to the point where these environmentalists are getting to sending us into the dark ages. And what a beautiful example of it coming right away. Honest, we didn't script it that way. This is a point of, you're going to live without hot water. Yeah, I know this isn't something that's going to kill us. We're talking about the most basic of comforts now, and we're pulling back on it. And we have the energy sources, guys. We have them there. We're shutting them down. We're kicking ourselves in the knackers. And to what end? It's a real big problem. But there's no reasoning with them. You got to remember, the people in power, you can bet that none of the politicians or higher ups in Hanover are going to be a part of that hot water ban. They'll probably be in their hot tubs and enjoying themselves quite comfortably. The sacrifices when it comes to fighting climate change seem to quite often come down to the citizen level rather than the governing level on these things. And it's just another example of how far backwards we're starting to go. How we're spitting in the face of the technology that's helped us enjoy the comforts we are today. And we've got to get a realistic view. We need to mitigate environmental damage. We can't eliminate it. Okay, we impact things. We're on the planet. You walk down the street, you're going to have an environmental impact. You breathe in, you breathe out, you're going to have an environmental impact. That's the way it goes. But there, as I said, when it gets almost religious-like with some of the environmental movement, where anything and everything that humans do is considered inherently evil. It's considered bad, and every impact we have is wrong. Look, we're never going to be zero impact, and we are a part of this planet just like any other species. I don't want to see unrestrained pollution or damage of natural areas or water being ruined or animals being slaughtered or pushed to extinction. No, I don't at all. But we also have to remember that we have a place here too. And part of our role in this place is making things more comfortable for ourselves, increasing our lifespans. Here's an example I can use as well. I mean, as I said, there's romanticized versions of people who lived in the old times. If you go to the buffalo jumps in Alberta and in the prairies, that's where the First Nations people used to chase and herds of buffalo, and they'd chase them off a cliff so they could, so they could eat, so they could survive. I mean, the buffalo pelts and hides and the meat, they were integral to them. And now you got to think, your average tribe, they weren't that big, despite what the movies make them out to be. They're usually be only 50, maybe 100 people tops, and they're going to run a few hundred buffalo off a cliff. That they're going to take everything they can, but in a hot prairie summer in the days before refrigeration, they'll make some pemmican, absolutely, and do what they can. But aside from that, the vast majority of that meat would go and spoil. And I'm not faulting them for it. It was survival. You used the tools you had to back then. But what I'm pointing out at is we are a lot more efficient now. In general, we still consume meat, but we truly don't waste any now. We can refrigerate, we can process, we can cure products. Likewise, they were gatherers. People could go into an area and clear it right out of berries and other items that might harm other animals farther down the line. Now we have good intensive farming practices where we can produce a lot of food with a much smaller footprint than we ever did historically. We should be celebrating that. But what are we doing? We're banning the fertilizers. What's that going to lead to? Part of the other things too, one of the more devastating things to the environment, particularly in South America and parts of Africa, was slash and burn farming. You're cutting into forest land, you're cutting into good, productive bush because you want to expand and keep farming to keep feeding a growing population. Well, that still happens, but it's reduced a lot because, again, modern farm practices have allowed them to get more harvest out of existing plots of land. So you don't have to keep cutting into the jungles, keep cutting into surrounding areas in order to make enough food to feed your population. But you need fertilizers for that. You need pesticides for that. You need to have all these things to get a certain amount per acre. Organic fertilizers are fun for a hobby. They are not feasible on a large scale, not on a commercial scale. But again, try to reason with our political betters. Try and get it clear with them that these are good for us and good for the environment. There's no reasoning. It's black and white to them. They can only respond to things by banning them. So enjoy those cold baths in Hanover, guys. I feel for you. And what's going to happen? I mean, that's what I mean too. When they ban these things, does it really help? They're going back to coal in Germany. They're reopening coal mines. They're firing up their coal-generated energy again. I mean, coal has gotten better than it used to be. As the days are long gone from, say, when there was that fog in London that was killing people because of the amount of air pollution from coal burning, 100 and some years ago. They got much cleaner burning coal now. But I mean, I think most people agree, if you're looking to reduce emissions in general, coal is the least desirable fuel source. But it's also very plentiful. So because we went and shut off plentiful natural gas sources, shut down nuclear, did all of these things like that, suddenly they're going back to coal because they're desperate. And what would happen in my area, for example, I burn natural gas to heat my house. If they shut it off, to hell with you guys. I've got a wood stove. I'll get another one, and I'm just going to start cutting wood from the bush behind my property and burning that. Is that going to be cleaner than the natural gas? Is that going to be better for the environment than the natural gas was? There's just a complete lack of reality. That's why I call them a cult. I mean, that's the thing when it comes to cults. Well, again, I've talked about it. I got a flying spaghetti monster tattooed on me. I'm not big on religion in general, but hey, to each their own. But to do those things, to get into a cult in particular, you have to set aside reason. You have to, facts don't matter anymore. Now it's all down to doctrine and gospel, orthodoxy. And people, maybe that would take a bigger philosophical mind than mine. Maybe that's kind of what happened. I mean, religion is certainly far less prevalent than it used to be. It's gone, but in religion gave, and it's not gone, but there's far fewer people practicing it faithfully. And that gave people, though, a sense of purpose, a place to go, a place to meditate, something to think about. And with that not being there, right, maybe there's an instinct that draws people saying, I have to have something. And a lot of them embraced environmentalism. Well, that's all dandy. Paradoxy there said, they traded one religion for another. I think there's something to that. And I mean, that can transfer to other forms of extremism too. It's not just environmentalists, There's nutcases who join white supremacist groups, and they're not nearly as prevalent as the crazed activists and leftists would always say, but they exist. There's little groups of neo-Nazis and losers and others because they had a void somewhere, and unfortunately they filled it with an extremism over on that with racism. And otherwise we get environmentalists, other people. They've got some sort of personal void, and they filled it with environmentalism. And it's not serving us well. What is it? Ashley Ellis saying, Idiocracy, a good movie. Yeah, actually, Idiocracy was kind of a crappy movie, but the concept was fantastic, and it's got a few good chuckles in it. And if you haven't seen that one, what Ashley's referring to, it's a movie that goes in, and the opening sequence, I think, was the best part of it all, because it showed you basically, I won't give it all away, but the dumber couples are, the more likely they are to breed a lot. The morons who live in the trailers and aren't terribly bright and aren't terribly self-sustaining. The one thing they can figure out is how to reproduce, and they are doing so plentifully. Whilst the more responsible people and forward-thinking people and educated people tend to hold off and sit back and wait. So, of course, when you get generations happening like this, guess what happens? The stupid end up overwhelming the intelligent in population growth. I mean, that's natural selection, right? It used to be that a lot more people died of stupidity. I mean, they still die of stupidity. The internet gives us examples every day where we could see that. Lots of comical deaths by idiocy, but not nearly as much as it used to. Now morons can very comfortably live thanks to social services and a safe society and things like that, all the way to the point of reproduction, and start crapping out those kids like nobody's business. And with any luck, they'll get a government job because they don't have to show any talent or hard work or intelligence there, and they can make it all the way to a pension. Meanwhile, they just keep breeding and breeding and breeding. So, it used to be the reason intelligence went up was because the stupid died, the intelligent lived longer. Well, that's not happening anymore. Nothing's culling the herd effectively enough anyways. Yeah, I know. I'm not trying to insult everybody. I see Sarah Lindquist say, hey, I have 6 kids. That's not me. No, not every person who's had a number of children is necessarily an imbecile. But I'm just getting to that point of it. If we're going to be evolving and getting brighter, the basic tenets of evolution aren't happening right now. People aren't dying off from being stupid like they used to. I mean, there's always going to find example of somebody who stuck their tongue into a light bulb socket and didn't make it to the point of reproduction, but most of them get to the end. The kid who used to eat paste in the classroom when you grew up 200 years ago probably would have died of something. Now they are a high-ranking bureaucrat in some place, shuffling one piece of paper from one desk to another desk. Dennis pointing out Lizzie May is running for the Green leadership again. Yeah, speaking of green lunacy, I guess, the Green Party, it's one thing, at least their nuttiness will always keep them from ever actually getting into power because they're just too flaky out there. And Liz May, come on. I mean, she's entertaining. There's that. She's back. I mean, the party, she left the leadership. They brought in a leader due to the inherent anti-Semitism of a whole pile of the members of the Green Party. They basically pushed their own leader out. And now Liz thinks, maybe I'll run for it again. Wait a minute, so Elizabeth Henderson, where the hell is this guy leading the convo? Depopulation, anyone? Oh, piss off, Elizabeth. No, I'm not on the World Economic Forum depopulation front. I think we should populate as much as possible. I just don't want to see more stupid people. That's the thing. I just want to see the herd culled somehow. Maybe if we get the hard enough times as I said, environmentalism sets us back enough that we are actually living off the land and having to, fight off bears to get by and find our sources of heat to through the winter on our own. A lot more stupid people will die before they reproduce. Maybe we'll be better in the long run. Maybe it's cyclical, but it makes for some hard times for a little while right now. And I mean, again, I think there's no better example of just how high this stupid can rise when you look at Canada's Prime Minister. I mean, when children are told anybody can become the Prime Minister, holy crap, it's true. I mean, look at this. Justin gets his shoes on the wrong feet 50% of the days when he gets up in the morning. And he's holding the highest office in the land. And he had kids, assuming Sophie was with him when that happened. So, I mean, Pierre Trudeau, whatever he was, and it wasn't that good, he wasn't stupid. But I mean, there's some truth to things too, I guess. Well, but then there was Margaret, but your genetics are not guaranteed to make a bright child, even if you're bright yourself, I mean, nobody likes to admit that, but hey, sometimes one of your kids might be a little stupid. That's fine. It happens. But again, honestly, seriously, if we're looking at evolution and what brought us up to where we are, the factors aren't there anymore. They aren't there like they were 1,000 years ago when people didn't survive to adulthood. Likewise, here's something we'll get some folks wound up. But when you see the prevalence of things like diabetes and asthma, for example, two things that are on the rise a lot, and the environmentalists like saying it's global warming is causing it and climate change and things like that. No, actually, it's not. The thing is, 100 years ago, having serious asthma and serious diabetes was unfortunately a death sentence. Very few people lived in, past 15 if they had type 1 diabetes or serious asthma. And now with modern medication, we can't cure either of those conditions, but we can treat them and they can live perfectly functional lives and carry on, which is great. And by the way, please nobody start misinterpreting, saying that we got to start weeding out people with those conditions. Not at all. I have a son with type 1 diabetes. But that also means that because there is a genetic element to these things, that we're going to see more people surfacing with it. And we will cope with that. That's where, again, modern advancements are a way perhaps we can deal with the things that evolutionarily were harder on us. So somehow, maybe we can find a modern solution. I'd like to see cures for asthma and diabetes, of course. That's the best outcome of things. Maybe with genetic studies we'll do that. But the other thing we really need a cure for is stupidity. And that one's a tougher one. And it's getting much more prevalent right now. And again, though, I mean, it all makes sense. I mean, modern advancements, things like that, they come with a good and a bad. And the bad isn't impact on the environment, actually. The bad is that we are actually turning our backs on the benefits we enjoyed to begin with. Yes, part of why I'm rambling in a bit. I'm not sure why my first guest hasn't shown up. Mr. Giesbrecht, he's been on before. Maybe there's a scheduling confusion or he's got some technical issues, but that's fine. I'll just keep talking to you. That's one thing I can do. And I can see our second guest is in the lobby already, but it'll be a little bit before we get to him in case Mr. Giesbrecht gets here. And I'm looking forward to some of that discussion on polling. It's going to be interesting because polls are influential, they're important, and they do have an impact on people. But if it's an incorrect poll, then it could be a damaging issue as well. So how do you address that? How do you ensure that you're getting as good an information as possible? And well, there's a proposal here and, a new app, and we'll see how effective that is. So we'll get to that. Let's look into a little more of, let's see here. Either way, I had to look at the comments now and then. So yeah, there's a story with Gil Bull telling us to eat with our hands. That's fine. Especially when I started off with, a segment with Dave and the Pope picking their noses. I'm not sure if eating with our hands is really an advancement. Here's an interesting one too. Here's a myth that keeps going on. Income claims are contradicted. So new Bank of Canada figures indicate income inequality is unchanged in 25 years, despite claims of a growing gap. Shows a report that the typical Canadian grew their net worth by an average of $230,000 last year with real estate gains. Okay, so that shows an equity gap because if you don't own a chunk of real estate, you're not going to get that big chunk of equity building up and savings for yourself. And it's been very healthy for people. As I was speaking to Mike, there might be a correction coming pretty soon. Some of that might be coming down. But some people are saying, oh, it's nothing, generational. Every generation seems to like to claim that the prior generation had it much better. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, you got to think of, the people who got into real estate 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Yeah, the housing prices were less, and wages, haven't risen quite to keep up with housing prices quite often. But they were also paying double-digit interest for mortgages. So the amount you had to save to try and get by was high. And there's a lot of consumer products now that are incredibly cheap relative to what they were years ago. I mean, you look at the price of just household items. There was no Walmart when I first moved out on my own, not in Canada anyways, and things like that. I mean, just even cutlery, crappy cutlery, I'd have to hit garage sales to get a few bucks together and do those sorts of things, and clothing and stuff like that. I mean, designer stuff was always, out there and expensive and cheaper. But to find really cheap consumer goods, and I know the quality tends to be poor, but if you're on a low income and scraping by, there is much more variety of those goods. A lot of that's due to Chinese imports. I mean, again, we can say whether or not it's worth it or not, but there's ups and downs. There's some areas that are better, some areas that are worse. But this income gap, this thing, because that's always, again, what socialists like to use as their rallying call, their reason to interfere in our lives, their reasons to interfere in the economy, their reasons to tax the rich. That's always a favorite vacuous call. That gap isn't really there as much as people like to make it out to be. In fact, by the numbers, it doesn't really exist. There's always going to be a bottom of the income scale. Always. It's the way it works. And there'll be some at the top. I mean, the important thing is to make sure we always have the equal opportunity to get out of that. And that's why I think student loan programs, for example, are great. I think that's one of the areas in social services where the government spends that. Yes, if we got somebody who wants to further their education, they've come out of high school, maybe they don't have a family with a lot of means, or maybe they don't get along with them, or they just don't have the money set aside. We don't want people missing out on educational opportunities, because it's better for us all with the education if possible. Give them a loan, and low interest loan, and generous terms, and that's what we do. I think it's great. But then I see a lot of them complaining later, oh, I got to pay my student loans, it's killing me. Well, it was a loan, okay? It was a loan. It was a loan on terms that you would never get in the private market anywhere else. And yes, that's part of your first lesson in the working world, is you got to pay off your debts. Get over it. Some of that entitlement we see a lot of it. Oh, wow, I can't pay these student loans. But often these are the same ones that, yeah, oh, by the way, I took a 6-month sabbatical hiking through Europe before I got a job. How much did you party? How many things did you spend? Hey, I wasn't a brilliant, wise spender in my younger years either. But you got to pay your damn bills. That's life. That's the way it goes. And you get a good deal on those student loans. People talking about writing them off. No. And if you got yourself a degree in interpretive dance or gender studies, I'm sorry that you got to make happy faces on lattes to make your living. You should have chosen a different course. Unfortunately, what happens then is they often go back into school, get a teaching certificate, because they know it's a route to a good pension and getting summers off. And then, of course, they do nothing but complain about their role in that, because teaching's not an easy job. But they had nothing else left, because, again, that philosophy degree is only going to get you so far. But the bottom line is, you get all that education. We loaned you that money. We did. I did. Dave did. You guys did. Pay it back. It's the way it works. And hey, again, we give generous terms. It's not like other loans. It's not like they're beating down the door when you owe money on other things. And it's certainly not interest rates, something like credit cards. But I don't like some of that conversation coming with whining people who have finished with their degrees. They seem to think that even with a degree, you're going to start at the top end of the income spectrum too. No, guys, it takes a while. You got to work your way up. You've got to get some experience. I know that always seems hard and frustrating. It seemed like that for me in my early 20s. Well, you can start here, but you need experience to start, but you can't get experience because you can't start anywhere. I know it takes a while, and you just got to push through it. But the entitlement's got to go aside. I have no use for people saying we should forgive all the student loan debt. No, absolutely not. I think that was one of the best lessons they learned, aside from whatever they learned in post-secondary, was that you got to pay your bills. So let's set that conversation out. And Jed Gorgon saying my man's a drywaller and I was in investment banking. Yeah, people do all sorts of things. My education is very, very limited. I guess some people wouldn't be very shocked with that. But, most of my time was in the oil field, things like that. I did some post-secondary, didn't complete it. I'll be blunt with some of my things. And I don't have a big level of high education. And I've done all right. Oh, look at that one. Best dating site. I think we'll just block that fella out there. So, yeah, we found a spammer. That means we're getting good traffic out there. But I would suggest against going to that site. It's probably not good. I'm not psychic, but who knows. Getting back to finances, let's look at this story here. Debt warnings for provinces. 2 provinces are in such dire shape, their net debt will run close to 100% of GDP or more in a generation. Speaking of debt, speaking of entitlement. This is where I get a big issue with the left too, where they just keep looking the other way while we're doing credit card financing with every level of government. Borrowing, borrowing, borrowing. It's funny, the left always calls us selfish for saying we got to cut back government spending, yet they want everybody to live on the credit cards of our grandchildren, because that's what it is. You're borrowing because somebody down the road is going to have to pay that bill. This is the sort of same culture of the people who think I should be able to get 5 years of post-secondary education for free and never have to pay the bills. Well, unfortunately, that's reflecting in our government as well. I'm not being selfish saying I want government cut. I'm in fact saying I don't want to dump my current standard of living, the bill for my current standard of living on my grandchildren. And this is 2 provinces are at the point, though, where they think it's going to be 100% of GDP within a generation. This is not sustainable. Sustainable is a key word. We hear from the left and we hear from so many. It's a buzzword. Well, this is not sustainable. And, so this is what? Manitoba's net debt. This is analysts predicted by 2046 it's going to be 79% of their GDP. You can't manage a province that way. You've got to cut spending. You have to. And then after that was Newfoundland and Labrador, which they think it's going to be 118% of their GDP by 2046. Guys, reality is coming to roost. And you see, interest rates are going up. This is the other thing. Every economist, and every non-economist like me and others were warning back when COVID was going, when they opened the floodgates for spending. Every country around the world's been doing it. And that's why currency's been devalued all over the place and cost of living is going up. And there's only one way that the government knows how to deal with it rather than cutting spending, and that's by having the Bank of Canada crank up interest rates to try and cool down the economy and slow inflation. Well, that kind of works, but you got to remember every point that interest rate goes up, every one of these provinces in our federal government that are carrying all of this debt has to spend billions and billions more just to service the debt. I mean, we're lucky. We've been fortunate for this long with low interest loans, but eventually it's got to go away, and it's happening. And I mean, a lot of us learned those hard financial lessons early. I learned them when I was young, when I got my first credit card. And then you get to find out just how stupid it is to carry a high balance with 20% interest on it, because you work and scrimp and save and put your money on it just to maintain the debt. You can barely knock the principal down. Well, right now we should be knocking that principal down as fast as we possibly can, cut spending, apply it to the debt, because interest rates are going up. And we are going to be in a great deal of trouble when we end up with half of our budgets or more just paying interest on debt. We got to stop this, but there's no discussion of that. There's none. The government's, we got Jody Gondek in Calgary with a pie in the sky $87 billion climate change plan. We got Justin Trudeau spending like there's no tomorrow. And we've got even the UCP here in Alberta. They're sitting on some good energy surpluses right now, which is fine, and it's lucky for us, and that's good. But I want to see some debt retirement. And I know that the leadership candidates are talking about it, but I want to see it. I want to see it on the books. Pay the bills. Don't start promising more spending. Knock down the damn debt, because you're going to have to pay it eventually. Here's another one. Cola vax mandate is upheld. A labor arbitrator dismissed a union petition opposing vaccine mandates at a Coca-Cola bottling plant in BC. I don't know. I'm mixed on this. It's a private companies, yet at the same time, there's workers' rights and things like that. These things don't have. They aren't stopping. The costs of some of these mandates and what they've put on people aren't going away. Again, back to Linda Slobodian, who's got that documentary coming out. She put a column up recently too. There's a big class action suit that's in the works, and I think I'm going to be speaking next week to one of the lawyers from that against the government, or at least the military, because of the abuse, and it was outright abuse of soldiers and such who chose not to be vaccinated because of the vaccine mandates. Like, they just went haywire in pushing these things and how they were going to enforce it. So we'll watch as these things happen. It sounds like in this case, though, the labor arbitrator said it's perfectly fine for Coke to fire staff for not being vaccinated. My bigger problem with this is we've already established that vaccines don't stop spread. It's not theory anymore, not at all. It's quite proven. There's lots of people who many jabs, they still catch it. I still believe that and I'm not going to go into the whole debate, but it could reduce adverse outcomes if you get the jab. Fine. But it has nothing to do with the spread. So if it has nothing to do with spread, then why are you worried as an employer? It doesn't matter to you. It doesn't. That person coming in unvaccinated is not going to be any more likely to spread that to a coworker than the one who is. So these mandates, they're ideologically based, not medically based. And it's hurting all of us. I mean, we talk about a screwed up labor market and labor shortages. We got so many companies. That's what I was talking about, virtue signaling companies. And the bigger the company, sometimes the worse it is. And Coca-Cola is a pretty darn big company. So paradoxically saying it must have been another justice of the peace deciding, I don't know, it was an arbitrator, so a union thing, so who knows what it was. But crazy times. Let's see here. Yeah, something Dave was talking about before. I'm going to get to the next guest pretty soon here in a few minutes. That cost for the Coastal GasLink pipeline project is up 70%. Trans Mountain Pipeline, the costs are going through the roof. These things are so delayed. If this government was based in reality, we should be fast-tracking these things. If they cared about the state of Europe and their energy crisis, or if they really do, they claim that they oppose Russia and what they're doing. Well, you want to know the best way to get Putin upset? Get some liquid natural gas terminals going and start shipping LNG to European nations that are dependent on Putin right now. That will get on his case. That will get on his nerves. But we aren't. We're canceling them. We canceled it in Quebec. We shut down Energy East. We shut down the Northern Gateway Pipeline. We regulated the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline to death. And then we were just beating the crap out of these pipelines, the Coastal GasLink and the Trans Mountain, and we can't get them done. So the costs keep going through the roof. As Jet Gorgon's saying, too many eco-protesters on there. Yes, absolutely. That Coastal GasLink pipeline has been held up so many times by these protesters. And again, the government showed if they don't like protesters, look what they did to Tamara Leach. Hey, they will arrest them and they will throw them in jail, indefinitely if they don't like them. Yet we've got protesters who actually attacked workplace sites with baseball bats and fire bombs. We had protesters out there who have been on their 10th arrest. We had protesters who built buildings and bonfires in the middle of a road. And they've been arrested and charged and released, and arrested and charged and released, and arrested and charged and released. Look, if the government wanted those guys gone, they'd be gone. They'd be in jail, and this damn pipeline would be getting done. Both of them. And, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, we're going to shut down a section because we found a woodpecker nest. We're going to shut down another section because we found a hummingbird nest. Guys, neither of those things are endangered. We're talking about a pipeline. If you look at even the picture, it's not much wider than building a new road. Get it done. This is absurd. I'm not going to believe these things until I actually see the product going through the other end of it. And this pipeline is supposed to go to our lone liquid natural gas terminal. We're 10 years behind the rest of the world with these LNG terminals. We got some of the largest LNG deposits in the world, or largest natural gas deposits, and we are not exporting it because we keep sitting on our hands with these terminals and holding them up and letting ideological hammerheads like Quebec stop terminals. There's an easy way to get Quebec to approve the terminal. You say, no more equalization, you parasitic welfare bums. That's how you do it. You know what? You cut their money off and you watch how quickly they will suddenly set aside the poutine and say, yes, you know what? Maybe having a terminal on our land might not be such a bad idea. But the government doesn't have the courage to do that. So the world goes into an energy crisis while we sit on our own. All right, there's enough ranting out of me for a while here. I'm going to speak briefly about one of our sponsors, and we will get to my guest, Mr. Moore, there. And that sponsor is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been a great sponsor for us for a long time. They're a great organization. They've been around for a long time. Their name says it all. They're an association for people who like shooting. I mean, we're talking about shooting targets. We're talking about shooting while hunting. We're talking about sports shooting. Not lunatics shooting, law-abiding firearm owners, or even collectors, whatever you may want to do with it. And we've got a lot of issues going on. We've got a government that's recategorizing firearms, a government that's seizing people's property. They do not want you to have the right to own and responsibly enjoy firearms. Canadian Shooting Association is there for you. If you enjoy firearms, like I do, responsibly, legally, I've never hurt anybody. Well, you got to stand up for yourself. You got to make sure that there's safety numbers push back for your rights. And doing that, the first step, take out a membership with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. It's not much, guys. It really isn't. And there's lots of resources as well. Links to safe firearm use videos, networking with other firearm owners, upcoming trade shows, shooting events, things like that. It's all there. So check it out, guys. Get on there. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Their website is cssa-cila.org. All right, let's get to a guest. You guys have been listening to me going on for a long time now, and that's Mr. Barry Moore. And he's been setting up the app for Flashcard Democracy to try and counter, I guess, uninformed polling respondents, to put it in a nutshell, though. I think Mr. Moore can expand a great deal on what that's about. So thank you very much for joining me today, Mr. Moore.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we spoke on the phone a little while ago, and it's a really interesting concept you've got on the go. So, I mean, I guess what you're saying is, well, I mean, polling, it influences people, it influences policy, but often perhaps the results are coming from people who might not be informed on the issues.
That's exactly it. Yep. People, I mean, I have to confess, I often would be one of those people. It's a busy world and a lot happening, and we often don't have time to really take a deep dive into things before we vote, before we poll. So I developed Flashcard Democracy as a way of just informing people. And I guess the whole concept with it is that it's not for everyone. Not everyone is going to have the time to really take a deep dive into something, but I'm hoping that, the result of a poll where people had to look at both sides of something, I'm hoping it will influence people. They'll see that, okay, this is the result of people that really looked at both sides. Or in the case of, let's say, a leadership campaign, people had to look at every single candidate and understand their qualifications, their background, their education, their policies. They had to know about every candidate before they can vote in a poll on Flashcard Democracy.
Yeah, so this basically would put person through like a process in the app where they would answer a number of questions to see if they're up to answering, the final questions on the poll, right?
Yeah, so the app includes flashcards to help you study. And then there's a time test. And I want to emphasize that the time test it's not difficult if you know the material. It's actually very simple. Like when I go to do it, I've got one up right now about the proposed Alberta Provincial Police Service. And when I go to do the time test, I've got 4.5 minutes left on the time. Like I can do it easily. It's not difficult at all. If you don't know the material, then yeah, you're not going to pass it. So that's the whole point of it. I didn't want to make it so simple that, you can pass it without knowing what the facts are. What's the point of the poll? The way I'm doing it, what's the point of it if you could pass it without knowing the material?
Yeah, so I mean that I could see how that could lead to getting more informed results on the poll. I would imagine though one of the challenges, one of the hard things with polling is getting people to dedicate some time to the poll at all in the first place. So it is going to increase your effort in finding people who will be able to be respondents though.
Yeah, so for my Alberta Provincial Police Service poll, I'd be thrilled if 100 people did it. It's not something that just everyone's going to do. But the people that do take the time and do it, I look at it like they're doing a public service. They're saying, hey, we looked into this, we took a deep dive, and here's what we think. I'd like to think of it as like a rotating advisory panel. It's a group of people that, took the time to really look into something, and they're advising the rest of us.
Yeah, so
it's actually kind of fun if it's challenging. It's not, I did have a friend that said he went to try to do it and he thought it should just be 10 easy questions or something. And he at one point said he was ready to smash his keyboard because he was having trouble passing it. But, the point is, I think it'll be more respected if it's not too easy. You have to know the stuff. If you know the stuff, it's actually very easy.
Yeah, and I guess another challenge, just for the sake of the accuracy of the poll, we spoke a bit about that before. Like polls, we know influence people. They can influence people. The results do. The media uses them saying this and that. So accuracy is really, really important. I mean, if you're principled and you want to get a good result. Something unprincipled pollsters do at times is push polling. They will have a lot of leading questions going into the poll and things such as that. What sort of efforts would you go to? Because when a person's answering a bunch of flashcards and questions, I mean, it could theoretically be abused that way. I'm certainly not saying you're doing it. So how do you control to make sure that that doesn't happen?
Okay, I want to emphasize that the polls that I'm doing in Flashcard Democracy, they're not statistically significant. They're not like a poll where you randomly select 200 people and they do the poll and you can claim that it is statistically accurate within 5%, 19 times out of 20. This is not that. This only represents people that have come and they've done the flashcards, they've done the time test, they know the material, and here's what they say on the poll. So I'm not trying to mislead and say that this is any type of statistically accurate poll. It's not that. But one thing I really strive to do is to make it non-bias. So for the instance of the Alberta Police Service, proposed Alberta Provincial Police Service, I made sure that I included information from the Alberta government site about that, and also a group called Keep Alberta RCMP.com, I believe it is. So I included both their information, and it's one of the things that I'm most concerned about is making sure that people view this as being non-biased. So one thing that I would like to do in the future, I haven't had time to do it yet, is have a little poll that anybody could do where they would rank it on how good of a job we're doing at being non-biased.
Okay. A question from one of the people saying, I like this idea, but how do we get a broad spectrum to do the poll? Like the other aspect of getting good poll results, of course, is having at least as large a sampling as reasonably possible.
Good
what
question.
Sort of outreach are you doing to get more participants and people involved in the polling?
Well, I did put out a press release through a company called PR Newswire. They're also affiliated with an outlet called Sission out of Montreal. And what I'm looking towards in the future is I want Flashcard Democracy to be set up as a nonprofit society. And as a nonprofit society, it could actually solicit donations and advertise in the paper that we're doing these polls and getting more people involved. Because it's, like you say, it's very difficult to get the word out and get people to hear about it. I'm hoping that a lot of people on your show will hear about this. They'll try it out. Again, it's not too difficult. If you go take a bit of time and study the material, it's not difficult at all. I'm looking at advertising, nonprofit society that can, people that believe in, in our democratic process. I might be delusional thinking this, but I honestly believe that this app could lead to a better world in which people are voting and they understand what they're voting about. Because it really distresses me that we get people, going to the polls and they're voting for our mayor, for example. And I heard people saying they voted for our mayor because they saw more lawn signs. So I don't think name recognition should be the only reason why we're voting for somebody. We need to know about their policies, what their education is, what their plans are.
Well, yeah, and in a broad spectrum of being informed. I mean, if a person voted based solely on watching my show, hey, I'd be thrilled. But all the same, they're getting a very biased outlook. I mean, one would hope they're getting their information from a number of sources before they do something as important as voting.
One thing I would also like to see, which probably will never happen, but I think would be awesome. Wait 1 second, I'm in the low battery mode here. I would like to see it if somebody challenged a politician. Let's say we had somebody coming from the East and, they're claiming that they understand Alberta and they care about our concerns. They care about us. Well, great. Let's do a little time test and see if you can actually prove that you understand all of the issues that we feel are important. That would be awesome. I doubt that'll ever happen, but that'd be fantastic if it did.
Yeah, so you're looking at setting this up as a nonprofit, but I mean, it wouldn't necessarily mean you wouldn't potentially charge for services like polling. Lots of people, private companies, buy polling. They want accurate data for market research, things such as that. Or, of course, in political and media, there's a lot of polls get commissioned. Would your company be commissioning polls though for outside organizations?
It's not something I've thought of right now. I wasn't thinking of making a service that we charge for. I was actually hoping it would be set up, as I said, like a nonprofit society where, we could actually solicit donations. I would actually like to see the opposite. I would like to see it set up. A future vision of this is that we would actually pay some people to do the survey. So I would like to see it where there's an easier survey, kind of an intermediate one, and an advanced one. And for an advanced one, I would like to see it where people would actually get paid to do it, because it might take several days of study before they really understand the issues. And so it's going to eat up their time, and I would like to see them get paid for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a large poll is a time commitment, and people aren't necessarily going to be willing to do so altruistically as much as we wish they would.
Yeah, and this one's not just a poll. It requires you to have knowledge. It requires a lot of study. You have to take time and learn all the facts. You have to learn both sides of an issue, and then do the poll. So it's not the same as just sitting down and doing a poll with your current knowledge. You need to learn, like, for example, for the Alberta Provincial Police Service, proposed Alberta Provincial Police Service poll, you have to study the pros and cons of the police force. You have to know budget numbers. You have to know transition times. What's the projected transition cost? How long will it take to transition to an Alberta police force? What's the minimum and the maximum cost that it's likely to cost, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, who did the study for the Fair Deal panel. You have to know stuff before you do this poll. So that's why I would like to get to the point where people would get paid to do it.
Yeah, well, and I just do like the principle, at least, of seeking information for the sake of getting accurate information. Part of the problem with commissioned polls, and it does happen. I mean, if we see a poll commissioned by a tobacco company on the harms of tobacco, surprisingly, it's going to come out saying tobacco is not terribly harmful. And likewise, a poll commissioned, at least a public poll commissioned by a political party, will often just have ways of leading or targeting demographics, so it's going to sound a lot better for themselves. But there's a lot of people who want real and accurate information. I mean, political parties like doing internal polls, which they keep to themselves, but they want accuracy because that models how they're going to go. So I can see, as a public service, I guess, having some data available through yours, it could the information could be broadly used for a number of people on fronts.
Exactly. Excuse me. I just had to make sure I plugged in. I didn't realize my battery was going down.
No problem.
Should have thought ahead on that. But yeah, absolutely. I just want to, if I could take a quick minute and just look at my notes and see if there's anything I've forgotten to mention. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So so we want to get basically, one of the biggest things with is finding a way to help us pick better leaders. So
he's kind of frozen up a little bit there. Maybe Mr. Moore will come back in a moment. So it's an interesting concept he's putting out. Something really different. Oh, there we go. Are you back? No, he seems a little hung up. But as I mentioned before, unfortunately, a lot of polling numbers, you got to take them with a grain of salt. Depends on who you're getting it from. Depends on who commissioned it. Or we look at pollsters, such as why am I forgetting his name? There's that pollster. He's a liberal fella. He went completely off his rocker there, and just spitting out vitriolic things towards other political parties and things like that. And how could you possibly trust anything coming from that guy's polling company? That was the Ecos, I believe. I could be wrong. I don't want to get the wrong polling company smeared with that. Why am I forgetting his name? I used to beat on him on Twitter quite a bit until he blocked me there. Frank Graves. But, so we want accurate numbers and we want to reduce it. Let's see if Mr. Moore's got his connection back. We'll kind of close things up there. So Mr. Moore, before I let you go, where then can people get to your site and your your initiative and your company so they can take part or find out more about it?
Very, very simple. Just go to flashcarddemocracy.com and Yeah, it's very simple. There's a button to click on the flashcards. When you're ready, there's a link to the time test. Again, it's not difficult if you know the material. I can do it with almost 5 minutes left. So I would really like to get some more people that are voting on whether or not we should have our own Alberta Provincial Police Service. I've got the flashcards for both sides, so we're not biased. Look at why we should have it, why we shouldn't have it, and share it with a friend. There's a little form where you can click on it and email it out to a friend. Send them your time test code. You get a code that proves that you completed it, so you can challenge a friend. You can say, "Look, here's my code." They punch it in. They can verify that you passed it, and get more people informed.
Great. Well, I appreciate your effort and your time to come on to talk to us about it today, and we'll keep an eye on it and see how it develops. Hopefully, lots of people participate, and we can see some good information out there, Mr. Moore. So,
thank you very much.
Yeah, perhaps we'll talk again down the road.
Take care.
All right. So that's Barry Moore of Flashcard Democracy, and he's trying a new approach to polling. To try and get, I guess, better outcomes. We want to get the numbers. And Ashley Ellis saying, why do we want or need polls? Well, we need polls. That there's no getting around that, whether it's private business when you're trying for market studies or things like that. Or again, of course, it's used a lot in politics just to get a feel of what the public sentiment is. I mean, something we can be guilty of a lot, particularly myself and others. You get into a bubble. You don't see outside. You don't necessarily think of how people outside of your your bubble think, and you can get a broken view on how the majority are thinking. It doesn't mean you have to agree with the majority or things like that, but you can make better informed decisions if you got a better idea of how everybody else is thinking on things and where they're going, whether you want to change how they're thinking or appeal to what they're thinking. But either way, you don't have to like it, but there's definitely a purpose and a reason for polls. And I mean, it's been known for a long time that polling numbers in themselves, even if that's not what they're supposed to be about, can influence people. And I don't think it still happens, and mostly just out of expense. I don't know if it's still the law, but I know it used to be illegal in Canada for a company to release political polling on the day of an election. You couldn't put it out that day because they were worried that polling results would impact people on the day of the vote too much and it would mess with the vote. How much that impacted, I don't know. I don't know if that law was worth it, but it did show that people recognized that the poll itself is of something that can influence people and change how they might have behaved. And Rain Morden saying, yeah, that's the problem. It depends on who's putting out the poll and who's taking it. And I guess one thing to be said for Mr. Moore, it doesn't sound like he's got an agenda, or whether money making or politically. He's just trying to put together a system where people vote. I mean, if somebody phoned me up with a pollster and they were asking questions about, I don't know, advanced microbiology in the North, and I just started pushing the touch tone and voting on things in it, I wouldn't be giving them a good result because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So his theory, I guess, is his plan is to have people have at least a baseline of informed knowledge before they choose how they're going to vote on it. And polls are contentious areas. They are. I mean, we see wide spreads within them. We see them been terribly inaccurate before, and other times frighteningly accurate. They can be used as tools. And the term I used earlier was push polling. Nenchi's very first election campaign, when he won in an upset victory in Calgary, one of the biggest tools they had, and Stephen Carter, his weasel in chief, was his campaign manager back in that time. It was Nenchi's campaign manager. And one of the things they used ruthlessly was push polling. And Carter would bristle, get all upset whenever somebody called it push polling, but it's exactly what it is. So the way that would work is your phone would ring, and you would get asked about like 5 different issues from a recorded thing, touch tone, if you sit long enough, what is your view on this? What is your view on this? What is your view on this? And then at the end of the call, it'd say, based on your answers, the mayoral candidate most appropriate for your policy views is, and guess what? It was always Nenchi. It didn't matter what buttons you pushed, the final answer was always Nenchi. And that influences people. If people weren't paying attention to the issues, if they weren't paying attention to policy stances, and they listened to this thing and suddenly thought they knew what they're talking, oh, Well, Naheed Nenshi agrees with tax reduction, and he agrees with smaller government, and he agrees with supporting businesses. Well, he's definitely my candidate because I said all those things on there, and this phone just told me he's the best one, so I'll vote for him. Very unprincipled way, not illegal, but unprincipled way of impacting voters using a poll. Push polls, yeah, that's one way they can be used. Another thing with polling is, you can astroturf. People sometimes move with the crowd. If you can have a poll that you set up with just a certain area, let's say I was running a campaign in a constituency and I knew that this 10 square block area had a certain demographic that was going to be really strongly in support of us. And I ran a poll just of that area and then showed, hey, look at that. We got 80% support in this constituency because people in this constituency that we asked, all 500, 80% of them liked our candidate. And I released that and I put it out with the press. A lot of people, unfortunately, they are sheep-like. It's like Barry was talking about people voting based on the roads, the lawn signs they see up and down the street on candidates. That could help push them towards it. And I'm not recommending people do these things. I'm just talking about ways that polls get abused and some of the power that polls have. So you got to take a lot of them with grains of salt. Having ones we can trust, that's the hard part. And we've got to look at where things are going. Scientifically controlled proper polls, they're hard, they're expensive, they're time consuming, they are not easy to do. We throw a poll on the Western Standard website. That's just more of a novelty. I mean, it gives you a result, it gives you a feel, but it's a selective crowd. It's just an app that's on the website. It can be, people can change IP numbers, I think, and vote multiple times. Or if I put a poll out on Twitter, I can get 1,000 respondents on pretty much anything within an hour or two. But that only tells you what my Twitter followers think, not what people in general think. So that's not a very good, unless I'm curious about my own followers. It's really of limited use. It's a novelty. It's for fun. Ashley saying it's a mind effery. I wouldn't put it that far. See, there's a lot of polls where the people do want accurate information, and so they don't want to use the poll to change consumer or voter behavior. They just actually want to know where they're standing. As I said, unfortunately, with politics, that's usually internal polls that parties do, which means they run it and they don't share that information. They just want it for themselves, so they can use it for their own campaign modeling. But there are good polls out there. It's like everything else, like every bit of news, like everything else. Unfortunately, it's up to us. You got to dig in and have a closer look for ourselves and, take every poll with a grain of salt. One of the first things I look at a poll, if it seems really strange or an outlier or whatever, go to the polling company and see who commissioned it. If they won't say who commissioned it, you really can't take it that seriously. I mean, if it was commissioned by a political party or a lobby group or whatever, chances are it's going to be somewhat skewed. The questions can be leading lots of things. But other times, often, and I'll give credit, often with media, they're just looking for some numbers. You spend money on polling, you get the results, and you can be the first to release those results, and it's good news copy, and it gets your publication out there and things like that. And that publication wasn't necessarily trying to skew the outcome whatsoever, because they really wanted to put an accurate one out. Let's go through some news here. Twitter's warning governments around the world and are asking at an alarming rate. The social media company, governments around the world are out there. They're not warning the governments. This is a terribly phrased sentence. But either way, so the Twitter's giving out a warning. There's governments pressuring them all over the place to give them private details of the user accounts. I know this sort of thing makes people uncomfortable online in general. But this is even Twitter saying it. We're seeing a concerning trend towards attempt to limit global press freedom with an increase in government legal demands targeting journalists, as well as an overall increasing number of legal demands on accounts. Yeah, we got that in Canada. That's one of the countries that they aren't saying it outright, but that's us, man. That's C11, that's C18. The governments are trying. They hate free sharing of information, and Twitter does it. Twitter's already left-leaning. I think they just want to be somewhat independent from government, so that's why they're actually, calling it out a bit. But man, information is everything, whether it's polling, whether it's Twitter, whatever it might be. And that's why the government is always so desperately trying to control it on us. Let's see. This was a neat CTV story I saw today going through the Twitters. And it said, should we be naming heat waves like hurricanes? Yeah. CTV, they're getting worse than CBC, I swear. So they're fear-mongering pandemic stories, they're monkeypox stories, they're BS and their crap. But of course, they're sniveling for more tax dollars all the time. So don't forget, we don't take any. And they put out headlines like that, like heat waves. Now we got to start naming them because global warming or climate change. You know, remember, it's not always global warming because we get a snowstorm, that's climate change. If we get a flood, it's climate change. If we get a drought, it's climate change. If you get constipated, it's climate change. It doesn't matter. It's always climate change. But they want to make sure everything sounds as scary and nasty and bad as possible. So heat waves, let's name them. Let's make that memorable heat wave. This is a rare occurrence. Oh, bullshit. There have been heat waves since the beginning of summers. This is nothing new. Look at the weather patterns of the dirty 30s. We didn't name them. There was a heat wave. But this is what they're doing. They want to make it more scary, more and more scary. Scare people, scare people. Let's see, we got another one. The gun sellers and advocacy groups, greeted with cynicism that announced details of the federal firearms starting to talk about their buyback plan for all the firearms they're going to steal from people. And as the gun owners and sellers are saying, no price is high enough. You see, they're not buying back guns, they're stealing them. And if they don't have my consent, it doesn't matter if they're going to offer me $1 million for my old 22. If I don't want to sell it and they take it, it's theft. Doesn't matter how much money they gave me. They don't have my consent. So the government wants to steal these firearms, and they're offering our own money to buy it back anyways because they're tax dollars. And this isn't helping. It's not doing a damn thing anyways. The people causing the problem are gangsters with illegal guns that are smuggled into the country. They're handguns. Going after these is just going to be another boondoggle, and it's just an odious policy in general. And don't call it a buyback. Call it what it is, a theft. You want to steal our property and give us some money of our own money back in order to do it. It's like that carbon tax rebate too. Hey, we're going to pull some money out of this wallet and hang on to it and take a big chunk out of it in a cut, and we'll hand you some back, and you're supposed to thank us for giving you a little bit of your own money back. That's where this government lands, and Trudeau's fart catchers online saying, it's a revenue neutral thing. The carbon tax doesn't cost you anything. You get a rebate. You're a moron. You don't get a rebate. It's all our money, you twit. Man, if these guys really are that stupid, I want them to come by the office. We'll play that game. Give me your wallet. I'll pull out $100. I'll give you 70 back, and I'll slap you in the head if you don't thank me for it. Idiots. But they're the ones who put Trudeau in power, and there he sits. All right, let's get people get on to the long weekend there. And wait a second, what do we got? Somebody wanted a heat wave named. Ashley wants a heat wave named after him. Pick January 5th heat wave. Yes, there's not too many January 5th heat waves, but there we go. I mean, we could have some vanity heat waves named and everything, so let's make use of this thing. But it's just an absurdity. So, either way, a reminder now, again, look at our other digital content and subscribe and like and hit those alert bells and everything on there. Comment on things, guys. Share it with people. That's how we can spread out there and get more people, more audience, and get more resources. It's appreciated. Linda Slobodian, her documentary is you've got to check that out, guys. It's Abandoned but Not Forgotten. It's about Afghanistan. It's a must watch. It's coming out tonight. Make sure to share it with people so we can produce more of these kinds of things. And as well, Mel Risden has that series she's been putting out on there too. It's been very well watched. I'm going to be back on Tuesday, and I'll have multiple guests. But for now, the only one I got booked solidly is Kevin Holland. He's with the National Police Federation. These guys are actually fighting against having a provincial police force come in. I don't necessarily agree with them, but it'll be a good discussion. So have a good long weekend, you guys. Try not to get too sunburned or mosquito bitten or impaired and hungover. And I'll see you all on Tuesday. We'll start another week all over again.